Yukihira took a moment to lift his gaze from the old books he had been reading. As a historian, he was used to spending many hours studying old dusty tomes, telling the lives of emperors, generals, and heroes of times long forgotten, sometimes only under the dim candlelight. But his work was unlike any other. This chronicle he had been writing, his magnum opus, was the complete history of the lives of all the shoguns that had lived, from the heroic Kamakura era to the more recent years of Bakumetsu. He cracked his fingers, picked up his pen, and began writing from where he had left off. In this latest video on the history and culture of feudal Japan, we will take you on a millennium-spanning whistle-stop tour of every shogunate that ruled the land of the rising sun. From the first Kamakura shogun, who seized the reins of the country from the emperor, to the fall of the last Tokugawa shogun at the cusp of the modern age. And if you're a fan of Japanese history, you should watch our series on the Russo-Japanese War and the Pacific War by becoming a patron or YouTube member via our links in the description and pinned comment. You will also be able to watch our series on the fall of Sparta, First Punic War, Italian Reunification Wars, Albigensian Crusade, History of Prussia, Biography of Sulla, Reconquista, World War II North African Campaign, Persian Wars, War of Spanish Succession, and much more, alongside other perks. Thanks to our YouTube members and patrons for supporting us. The Japanese imperial family is the longest-lived ruling dynasty in the world, with almost 15 centuries of documented rule. Despite this, the emperors of Japan have been the de facto rulers of the land for only a fragment of these years, which perhaps was the key to the longevity of the dynasty. But who ruled Japan if not the man who sat on the chrysanthemum throne? For almost 7 centuries, true power lay not with the emperor, but with the military ruler of the land, the shogun. However, our journey will start a bit earlier in time than the rise of the shogunate, beginning at a time when the most powerful man in Japan answered to the last name of Fujiwara. At the beginning of the Heian period in the mid-9th century, the Fujiwara clan had become the most powerful family in Japan. Although nominally subservient vassals to the Japanese emperor, the Fujiwaras took advantage of the title and rank system in the imperial court to monopolize the highest court titles, especially that of the imperial regent, the Kanpaku. Fujiwara women would also be married into the imperial family, becoming empresses and mothers of future emperors, gaining the Fujiwara further leverage to control the imperial family. They exerted this control by forcing emperors to abdicate at a young age before they could gather any significant political power. Since the emperor who replaced him would be just a child, his Fujiwara grandparent and regent would rule in his stead, arranging further marriages and appointing more Fujiwara relatives in high-ranking positions to perpetuate their family's power. But while the Fujiwara monopolized court power in Kyoto, far away from the capital, a new social class that would rival the nobility was emerging. This was the caste of the Bushi, more widely known as samurai. These professional warriors granted their services to the noblemen that had accumulated large estates, and due to the fact that they preferred living in cosmopolitan Kyoto, needed someone to protect the land in their stead. Through time, trickery, and brute force, some of these samurai were able to take ownership of the land and establish their own clans. The Fujiwara regency system worked until almost the end of the 11th century, when Emperor Go-Sanjo, who was not related to the Fujiwara, ascended the throne. The trend of the emperor retiring early continued for the next century, but by then, these retired emperors had come to hold significant political power even from within the monasteries they had retired to. This cloistered rule, known as the Insei system, was a recipe for disaster, as many retired emperors were concurrently trying to rule Japan. The situation reached a boiling point in 1155, when Go Shirakawa became emperor, much to the annoyance of the retired Emperor Sitoku, who wished to be succeeded by a son, not a brother. The dispute between the two men was resolved in a short but pivotal war in Japanese history known as the Hogen Rebellion. Both rulers were backed by members of the Fujiwara, Taira, and Minamoto clans, but it was Go Shirakawa's forces that emerged victorious, especially due to the leadership of two great men, Taira no Kiyomori and Minamoto no Yoshitomo. Through their victory, Taira and Minamoto, two samurai clans that descended from past emperors, were established as the principal military powers of the land. Not many years later, in 1160, a similar power struggle occurred. this time between the now cloistered Go Shirakawa and the new emperor Nijo. Having once been allies, the Taira and Minamoto were now pitched against each other, with Taira no Kiyomori and Emperor Go Shirakawa triumphing over their enemies. Kiyomori's military strength was now peerless, and the head of the Taira clan swiftly climbed the ranks of the government, becoming chief minister of the government, or Daijo Daijin. Inspired by Fujiwara, he even married his daughter into the imperial family. The Taira were the de facto rulers of Japan for 2 decades, when the ghosts of the defeated Minamoto returned in the form of Yoshitomo's sons, whom Kiyomori had allowed to live but had banished. In 1180, the greatest samurai conflict until that point in history broke out. The Genpei War, as it became known from the names of the 2 clans, was the conflict that would once and for all settle the differences between the Taira and the Minamoto, and condemn one of the 2 into nothingness. Thankfully for the Minamoto, Yoshitsune, the half-brother of the clan leader Yoritomo, was a brilliant military commander. Yoshitsune was able to subdue the Taira forces on numerous occasions, most notably in the Battle of Ichinotani and Yeshima. The sad epilogue of the Taira was written at the Battle of Dan-no-Ura. In the stormy waters of the Straits of Shimonoseki, most Taira men, women, and even the 6-year-old Emperor Antoku met their demise. The Minamoto were victorious, and Yoritomo wasted no time to consolidate his power. Coldly and cynically, this included moving against his half-brother who had helped him win the war, with Yoshitsune ultimately committing seppuku. Uncontested, Yoritomo was given more and more powers, and in 1192, Emperor Go-Toba awarded him the title of Sei Taishogun. He wasn't the first man to be awarded the title, that first came into usage several centuries earlier, but he was the first that set up a military government, and thus the first shogunate of Japan came into being. From his capital in Kamakura, where he had established his military administration during the war, Yoritomo would exercise complete authority until his death 7 years later. After that, power was transferred to his widow, Hojo Masako, and subsequently to the rest of her clan. This inaugurated a period known as the Hojo Regency, when the true power behind the Bakufu were the Hojo men who served as shiken, regents of the shoguns. For almost 150 years, the Minamoto shoguns ruled over Japan under the auspices of their Hojo regents. Their regime lasted until 1331, when Emperor Go-Daigo tried to overthrow the shogun and bring Japan back under a civilian government, an event known as the Kenmu Restoration. The emperor's first attempt at deposing the samurai failed, and Go-Daigo was forced into exile in the Oki Islands. However, the determined monarch launched a second uprising against the Kamakura Bakufu 2 years later, this time assisted by the samurai warlords Ashikaga Takeuji and Nita Yoshisada. It was Yoshisada who, in 1333, besieged and captured Kamakura, bringing an official end to the shogunate and restoring imperial rule. But fate had already picked another favourite in the face of Ashikaga Takeuji. Knowing the perils of having to rely on samurai lords to overthrow a samurai government, the emperor had done everything in his power to weaken Takeuji's position instead of solidifying it. He had done this by handsomely rewarding the 2 generals who had won him the war, but not the minor warlords. In addition, the emperor had parceled out the majority of administrative offices to men from the imperial court, instead of dividing these bureaucratic positions fairly between the nobility and the samurai. Moreover, the emperor had increased taxes for the warrior class. Ultimately, the measures the emperor took to erode the power of the samurai caste only embittered them against him. Within 2 years, almost every samurai in the land wanted a return to the good, not-so-old days of the shogunate. Gaidogo obliged them by appointing his son, Prince Morinaga, to the office of Sei Taishogun, a move that proved to be the straw that broke the camel's back. Ashikaga Takeuji considered himself the rightful man for the title, since he descended from the Minamoto clan and, contrary to the prince, was actually a member of the warrior class. His hostility towards Morinaga and the imperial family gradually increased until he ordered the arrest and imprisonment of the prince. The country further descended into anarchy when Hojo Tokiyuki, son of the late Hojo regent, tried to reinstall his clan into power by attacking Takeuji's brother Tadayoshi and briefly capturing Kamakura. Tadayoshi managed to flee before the Hojo forces had a chance to capture him. but the retreating Ashikaga troops managed to capture and execute Prince Morinaga. After this, any chance for peace had been squandered, and both Takeuji and the emperor, who was championed by his staunch ally Yoshisada, were now gathering their forces for an ultimate showdown. Needless to say, thanks to Go-Daigo's ridiculously bad mismanagement, the vast majority of the samurai threw their lot in with the two Ashikaga brothers. On the last days of February of 1336, just a few months after both sides had issued a call to arms, Takeuji triumphantly entered Kyoto, bringing an end to the short-lived Kenmu restoration and installing himself and his family as the new shoguns of the new Ashikaga Shogunate. Unlike Minamoto no Yoritomo, Takeuji chose Kyoto as his capital. By putting his base of power in the same city where the emperors of Japan lived, the Ashikaga shogun sought to keep in check the imperial court's power and influence on the land, and make sure the emperor did not pose a threat, lest the events of 1333 repeat themselves. Ashikaga power reached its peak a few years later during the reign of the third Ashikaga shogun, Yoshimitsu, who built the world-famous Golden Pavilion of Kinkakuji. However, as the decades passed by, the decentralized daimyo system the Ashikaga had implemented began showing its weaknesses. By the mid-15th century, their shogunate would crumble apart in spectacular fashion during the bloodiest century in Japanese history, the Sengoku Jidai. The Civil War era began in 1467, when a conflict known as the Onin War erupted between two vassal clans of the Ashikaga, the Hosokawa and the Yamana. While the causes of the war ran deep, the spark that ignited the powdered keg was the succession dispute over who would succeed Ashikaga Yoshimasa as shogun. On one side was his brother Yoshimi, whom Yoshimasa had named his heir while he was still childless, and who was backed by the Hosokawa. On the other side was his infant son, who was born unexpectedly late and was supported by the Yamane clan through his mother. The war lasted 10 years, resulting in the victory of the Hosokawa and the ascension of Yoshimi as the Ashikaga shogun. However, victory did not come without a price. Thousands had died, Kyoto was in ruins, and more importantly, Ashikaga power and control over their feudal daimyo vassals had waned. The overmighty clans realized that they no longer had to fear and obey the shogun's commands. Consequently, they began acting as independent rulers, waging wars to expand their own domains, with some even aspiring to become shogun themselves. During the 16th century, Ashikaga influence continued to decline, until in 1565, Shogun Yoshiteru was assassinated. It was then that a young and ambitious warlord called Oda Nobunaga first installed Yoshiteru's brother Yoshiaki as a puppet shogun, before changing his mind and ousting him from Kyoto, bringing an end to the shogunate. Following the collapse of the Ashikaga shogunate, Japan was without a generalissimo for about 4 decades. This period is known as the Azuchi Momoyama, named for the castles of the two powerful men who dominated the political landscape, Oda Nobunaga and Toyotomi Hideyoshi. While Nobunaga's ambition to unite the land was cut short in 1582, Hideyoshi was able to pick up where his master left off, subduing the various warlords throughout the land and unifying all of Japan. However, despite ruling all of Japan, Hideyoshi was of low birth and lacked Minamoto lineage. Because of this, he did not take on the title of shogun, but instead became Kanpaku, a title that for centuries had been reserved exclusively for members of the Fujiwara clan. With his son and heir still not of age, Hideyoshi's death in 1598 left behind a power vacuum, one that his former friend and vassal Tokugawa Ieyasu was eager to exploit. Just 2 years later, the forces of Ieyasu clashed with Toyotomi loyalists at the Battle of Sekigahara, the largest battle in the history of feudal Japan. Here, the Tokugawa side emerged victorious, and in 1603, Ieyasu was awarded the title of shogun. Thus, the era of the last shogunate, the Tokugawa Shogunate, officially began. Despite having fought hard all his life to attain this title, Ieyasu didn't cling to it for too long, and soon abdicated in favor of his son, becoming Ogasho, or retired shogun. In 1614, the Tokugawa would once again cross swords with the Toyotomi family. Here, the Tokugawas were once more victorious, with the Toyotomi clan being wiped out completely, eliminating the last potential rival to the new shogunate. For the next 2.5 centuries, the Tokugawa shoguns would rule Japan with absolute authority. Like Minamoto no Yoritomo, Ieyasu chose to stay far from the imperial capital of Kyoto, choosing Edo, now Tokyo, as his seat of power. The Edo period was characterized by relative peace and a policy of national isolation, as the ever-watching eye of the shogun left no room for daimyo to wage wars against each other. Throughout this period of stability, Japan experienced economic and cultural growth. Yet towards the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th, the shogunate, which based its wealth largely on agriculture, began experiencing economic difficulties and thus began to decline. In 1853, the American expedition of Commodore Perry reached Japan and through typical 19th century gunboat diplomacy forced the land of the rising sun to open its borders for international trade. What followed was an unparalleled economic crisis that would in time turn into a political one as the shogunate's economy collapsed. Dissatisfied with the economic situation and seeing the Tokugawa regime as weak due to the way it had handled foreign diplomacy, it wasn't long before many officials began opposing the Bakufu and thinking of restoring the emperor to power. In 1863, Emperor Komei broke centuries of tradition of not interfering in political affairs when he ordered the expulsion of the Western barbarians that had brought ruin to Japan, an order which the Mori clan of Choshu undertook quite enthusiastically. In turn, the Western powers responded to Mori attacks by using their naval superiority to sink Japanese ships and bombard coastal towns. The shogunate followed up on this by launching two punitive expeditions in Choshu in 1864 and 1866. While the first one would be considered successful, the second was a complete failure, as the more modern-equipped Choshu forces crushed the shogunate's troops. Seeing the writing on the wall, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, the 15th and final shogun, tried to reorganize the government while still preserving as much of his power as he could. Ultimately, there was little he could do, for the Choshu and Satsuma clans, the two main anti-shogunate poles, kept pressing for the complete downfall of Yoshinobu. In 1867, Yoshinobu gave them what they wanted when he agreed to step down. This was not enough for the men of Satsuma and Choshu, who wanted the complete removal of the Tokugawa clan from any position of power. To that end, they seized the imperial palace and proclaimed Emperor Meiji's restoration to full power, which also prompted Yoshinobu to fight back. Following the devastating Boshin War, the centuries-old institutions of the shogunate and the samurai class were abolished forever. Ironically, the last rebellion fought to preserve the old ways of the samurai was one led by one of the chief orchestrators of the shogun's downfall, Saigo Takamori. After his defeat, Japan had returned to a new imperial era that lasted until the end of the Second World War, where power originated from the man atop the chrysanthemum throne. Yet even then, the imperial military would still exert great influence, and at times completely control the government. The shogun, the bakufu, and the samurai might have been long gone, but their millennia-long legacy has left a permanent mark on Japan's history. They are almost synonymous. It causes little surprise then that even today, the term shogun can be seen almost everywhere, in books, series and films, and of course video games, and it will continue to be used for a long time yet. More videos on the history and society of feudal Japan are on the way. To ensure you don't miss that, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.